To begin with, you can download all the images and templates I'm using here from my website, link in the description. When I came back to tabletop RPGs after rage quitting for about 10 years, one of the first things I was missing were a few miniatures. I know there is a whole amazing world of 3D printing with miniatures that are unbelievably cool, but just like I've been rethinking the games and rules that best fit my games, I've also been thinking of going back to basics when it comes to terrain and miniatures. Paper minis are very cheap, accessible, and I grew up in the 16-bit era of video games, so I wanted my tabletop games to look just like the RPGs I used to play when I was young. Pixelated and completely flat. And now for the build. To start with, I decided to draw the standard D&D classes. They pretty much cover any archetype anybody would want to play as, so it was a good place to begin. Once all the classes were done, I arranged them in a couple of PDF files so it would be easy to print out. Link in the description. I thought of making a couple of different versions that could be useful depending on the materials you might have at hand. The fancy version. For this one, I printed the images on a very glossy photo paper. I cut them very close to the borders to get them ready for the next step. I laser cut very thin medium density fiberboard with the shapes of every character so it would fit perfectly. After that, I painted everything black so the black color from the MDF shapes blends with the black on the outside of the prints. Then I glued all the prints to the respective boards and added a round base just like your standard tabletop minis. Then everything is sprayed with a couple layers of clear coat and they are ready to go. The not so complicated cheaper version. The images were printed in heavy paper instead of glossy photo paper, which I think looks just perfectly fine for a miniature. I also used the sheets of wood that are used for school projects instead of MDF, so that also was faster to cut and cheaper. Cutting was exactly the same. Just one important detail for after that. Once you're finished cutting the minis, paint the border black with a marker. If not, the white line will be very obvious when glued to its board. Gluing the images was done exactly the same. And instead of spraying clear coat, I used wood varnish, which, again, it's a lot cheaper and easier to find. The full paper version, which is the most common and easy to make, and the exact version you can download in the link in the descriptions. I printed the images on the same heavy paper as before, and since the file is ready to fold and cut, it's just a matter of following the dotted lines, fold the mini, and then cut the extra paper if you like. I fold, glue and add the packing tape and just let it dry until it's ready so cutting the excess is easier. In the download files, you can also get a couple of foldable bookshelves, doors, and a few different floor tiles so you can build your pixelated dungeon for your games. So, which one is the best? This is the fancy one, made in proper 3mm thick MDF using photo paper, and I gave it a little coat of matte clear coat just so it would be even more protected. It looks great in the table, but it's a little bit complicated to make and materials are not that cheap. Here's the not so complicated version, using wood instead of MDF and using just heavy paper instead of photo paper. It kinda looks very similar, only difference being the texture on the image. I mean, varnish is kind of chaotic, so you can see, unless you add quite a bit of thinner to the mix, there's gonna be quite a lot of texture on top of your images. But overall, it's okay. It's cheaper and easier to make. And here is the full paper version, which I would say is the best one, considering this costs basically nothing and it's the easier one to make. I added a little wooden base so it would look a little bit better, but I mean it's fantastic. It's very durable. You can see it kind of has the same shininess as the varnish one. So it's very cheap, it's very easy, and it looks like really good. Look at that, pretty decent. But I actually made another one, but instead of covering it with transparent packing tape like this one, I used the wood varnish directly on top of the paper. Look how the colors become so much better once you apply the varnish. And it gave a similar finish to the one coated with the fancy matte clear coat. So I think this is the winner for me. It's easy and cheap like the full paper one, because it is full paper, but it has the really nice finish of the fancy one. So I would say this is the winner for me. After all this testing, I was getting ready to go and sell stuff to one of my first artist allies since before the pandemic, so I had to make a lot of copies, which was a real pain in the butt since I made all the minis with the most complicated shapes, so it took a million years to finish. I also decided to make some packing for them, so here is the final version ready for the show. While browsing the internet, there were two obvious materials that I couldn't find in time, so I will try to make some experiments in the future. One was transparent acrylic, using probably printable transparent stickers for the images, and the other version was using metal plates as the base. I know where to get the thin acrylics, but metal will probably be a bit more complicated to try. In any case, I have some investigation left to do on this topic, so that will have to do for today. I will see you in the future.